Okay, hello everyone. This is a follow-up to the first training that you guys listened to. It'll provide you with a more in-depth understanding of ranked choice voting, which can be helpful if you want to take legislative action or if you just want to learn more. Having more knowledge never hurts. So the presentation will really be focused on four different sections. So the first section we'll talk about is vote splitting, and then we'll move on to the lack of competition. Then we will talk about voter engagement and also just like civic engagement in general. And then we will talk about gender and age diversity. So this is a continuation of an example that I used in the first training deck, where you might have remembered I had showed an example of vote splitting in terms of the 2016 GOP primary, and former President Donald Trump had received roughly 30% of the votes. And we see something similar here with the 2022 Maryland governor race. And I wanted to throw that in there in case you wanted more of a Maryland specific example to look at. And then we also see something similar here in terms of the Baltimore mayoral Democratic primary, where Mayor Scott had received roughly 30% of the votes also. And this is not uncommon. In fact, it happens really often. Here's a statistic about the senators that are currently in office and the percentage of votes that they had received. So we see here that almost half of the senators in Congress right now were elected with less than majority support. And also, this trend is similar in the House of Representatives, where less than half had won their first primary with the majority support. So, with the way that we are currently voting, a lot of our legislators right now do not reflect the opinions of their entire constituency that accurately. But with ranked choice voting, we do try to address that issue by doing a ranking system. Again, you elect a candidate that is more reflective of the broader electorate. And so we try to address this issue. And then next issue, as I mentioned, will be the lack of competition. So in terms of the national scale, a lot of seats are safe seats. So that just means that it's not competitive. Either incumbents tend to re-win their re-election bid, or a lot of the seats are uncontested. And so the person currently in that role or position does not really have to face the urgency around re-rallying their constituency and re-campaigning. And in terms of Maryland, we also see something similar here, with incumbents oftentimes re-winning their re-election bid. And if you check out this report from Fair Vote, Dubious Democracy, they go into more of an in-depth overview of like the national scale. And then if you want to check out what these rankings mean, you can also do that. And so you might be wondering, well, why is the lack of competition an issue? Well, it's an issue because, again, politicians don't have that urgency around election season. So that means that they don't really have to act on the policy issues that their constituents care about. So, for example, we care about issues, or a lot of voters do care about issues such as climate change, education, transportation, or any of the issues that you care about. You want a politician or your legislator to be able to pass bills and legislation on that issue, but because they don't have that pressure, oftentimes they can sit in that office without really accomplishing anything. And so the next section that we'll move on to is voter engagement slash civic engagement. A lot of the times, opponents of ranked choice voting will make the argument that the ranked choice ballot is very confusing, the ranking system is confusing, you're making it harder on voters, but that's not really the case here. So there has been research from Fair Vote that has revealed several benefits of ranked choice voting in terms of civility and voting for the voter. And so, one finding that they found was that voters reported less negativity under ranked choice voting, which also goes to the benefit of ranked choice voting, which that there is less negative campaigning. And so if you have less negative campaigning, then there will be less negativity in general in terms of election season. And another benefit to that, again, is that politicians and your candidates have to run a platform based on policy and not really slandering the other candidate. And next up, I know that voter turnout is also something that is mentioned a lot in terms of the news. There's a lot of headlines talking about youth voter turnout as well, but we see with ranked choice voting, there is actually an increase in voter turnout, which again supports the argument that voters do actually like ranked choice voting and that it is not scaring people away from the ballot. And this is a specific example for New York City, which you can take a look at in terms of what the future could look like if ranked choice voting is implemented. So again, the research has found that ranked choice voting is easy to use. Voters would use it again. And also, voters had ranked multiple candidates using ranked choice voting. And it's a testament to the fact that voters do like ranked choice voting, and it's not difficult to use, as opponents would say. And again, turnout has been increasing with ranked choice voting. So those are some of the very important benefits that are signs of a healthy democracy. And last section that we'll cover is age and gender diversity. So you might be wondering what the difference in terms of women's representation would look like if ranked choice voting was implemented. And we have research conducted by one of our partners, Represent Women, that shows the difference in women's representation after the implementation of ranked choice voting in elections. So, in particular, we see that we are approaching the gender balance with the use of ranked choice voting. We also see an increase in women even running for these positions, and we see an increase in women being elected. We also see an increase in people of color deciding to run, which is great. And in terms of the statistics without ranked choice voting, we see that the majority of mayors and city council members from the 100 largest cities in America are mainly men, and women are heavily underrepresented. And in terms of Maryland, we also have not done great in terms of women's representation. Represent Women does research, and they publish something called the Gender Parity Index every year. So this is from 2022 specifically. But if you want to check out more about how that score is calculated, definitely check out their report. But in general, the findings have basically um, shown that we are struggling in terms of our gender diversity, and that part of the reason for that is because we don't have any congressional representation. And in 2022, we did not have any statewide elected executives who were women. And we also just historically have not had that many positions held by women. And you might be wondering why that is. Well, in terms of the way that we currently vote, it systematically does disadvantage women, and a few of the reasons are because women are less likely to be perceived as electable. They're less likely to be backed up by their establishment party. It's also very costly for women. They might not have as much time to campaign, and negative campaigning can also be inhospitable to women. And then in terms of our current voting system, it inherently does protect incumbents who are mostly male, so women already have a disadvantage there. But with ranked choice voting, we are targeting a systematic change in the way that we vote, and so these issues will be addressed and combined with um, other things such as multi-member districts and campaign finance reform or even term limits. We are set to see an increase in women's representation if we implement ranked choice voting. And this is an example of elections that have used ranked choice voting. You can see here that we are approaching the gender balance, and there has been significant improvements in women's representation, which is a result of ranked choice voting. And in terms of a specific election, if you wanted to know more, this is for the New York City ranked choice voting election, and women's representation had doubled after using ranked choice voting. So you do see a real tangible impact. And next, we're going to transition into age diversity. So currently, voters who belong to the age group of 20 to 34 make up roughly 25% of the Maryland population, but they are heavily underrepresented in the Maryland General Assembly. So hopefully with ranked choice voting, we will see a better distribution of legislators who do reflect the population. And in terms of the next generation of voters, we do see a lot of voters who belong to the Generation Z and millennials who do support ranked choice voting. And in the future, they will make up the majority of the voting population. So we know that a lot of voters do already support ranked choice voting and will. And in terms of our legislative action, if we could be a leader in this and show other states that this is a positive change to help democracy, then maybe other states can follow in our lead too. And if you want to take a look at this video, there is a great video by Congressman Jamie Raskin who gives his reasons for why he supports ranked choice voting.
Well, I mean,
And for the sake of this trading, you can listen to it on your own time. And then there's a tweet who it is from someone who does not support Congressman Jamie Raskin, but he does agree with Congressman Raskin's stance on ranked choice voting. So to sum it all up, we covered vote splitting, we covered civic engagement, we covered women, gender, and age diversity, and then we also covered competition. And so in terms of the broader picture of things, our strategy first is to educate Marylanders on ranked choice voting, which is what you're doing. And then we want to also build a coalition of organizations. We want to try to implement ranked choice voting in different cities across the state. And then lastly, we want to start the conversation between constituents and state legislators about potential legislative opportunities. So that's when all the information that I just mentioned can be helpful in terms of trying to make legislators understand that ranked choice voting is something that we want to see, that it's something that will benefit us, it's something that will benefit democracy and voter engagement. And a more concise version of our strategy is to enact ranked choice voting in Maryland, enjoy better elections, and show other states how it's done. And specifically, if you're working on endorsements in Speakers Bureau, you can include this slide about, you can use this as something you can do when you're talking with organizations about endorsements. Wanted to throw that in there too. And that is all that I have for you. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you so much for being a part of this movement.